The coffee cup was still warm in my hand when he said it in front of the entire board. "Sweetheart, why don't you go fetch me a coffee? This is a meeting for adults. 12 executives, 1 glass conference table. And Richard Kessler, my boss of exactly 4 months, laughing like he'd just told the funniest joke in Ohio. What none of them knew, what he didn't know, was that I wasn't just some assistant who'd wandered into the wrong room. I was the reason his paycheck existed at all. My name is Danielle Marsh. I'm 32 years old, and 8 months earlier, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Dayton, splitting grocery bills with my sister because my catering business had collapsed. During a bad year and taken my savings with it, I used to tell people I was between opportunities. That's a polite way of saying I was broke, humiliated, and answering job postings at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep from the stress of it. Nobody in my family had ever run a real company. My father drove a delivery truck for 31 years. My mother cleaned offices downtown, the very kind of glass towers I used to stare up at and wonder what it felt like to belong inside one. When I told them I was going to build something of my own again, my uncle laughed at Thanksgiving and said, "Didn't that already fail once?" He wasn't wrong to ask. It had failed, badly. But failure has a way of teaching you things success never does. And I had learned exactly what I did wrong the first time. So when I got the second chance, a quiet, almost invisible investment opportunity nobody else wanted to touch, I took it. I poured everything I had left into it. And within 7 months, that opportunity had grown into something worth more than anyone in that boardroom could have imagined, including the man currently laughing at me over a coffee order. Richard didn't know my name was on the largest shareholder document in the company. He was about to find out. I hadn't planned to keep it quiet this long. But 3 weeks earlier, when my lawyer finalized the paperwork making me the majority shareholder of Kessler Media Group, I made a decision that surprised even me. I decided to watch first, quietly, from the inside. I took a job as Richard's executive assistant under my maiden name, Danielle Reyes, telling HR I needed operational visibility before making any structural changes. Nobody questioned it. Nobody looks twice at the woman refilling the printer paper. What I saw in those 3 weeks turned my stomach. Richard was bleeding the company dry through a private consulting contract paid to his brother-in-law, a man who did no actual work and existed only on a spreadsheet. He was quietly planning layoffs for the customer service department in Cincinnati. Nearly 90 people, most of them single parents, while approving a 6-figure yacht refurbishment for himself the same week. And worst of all, he was 2 signatures away from selling off the company's original manufacturing plant in Toledo, the plant my own father used to deliver freight to, the plant that employed people exactly like my parents. He talked about all of it like it was nothing, like people were just numbers that got in the way of his bonus. I sat outside his office one evening, holding a folder full of financial records I'd quietly copied, and I felt something harden inside me. This wasn't about revenge for the coffee comment, not really. This was about every person in that Toledo plant who had no idea their jobs were sitting on a rich man's whim. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Richard's plan was to push the plant sale through fast, before anyone could ask questions. He had no idea I already had the votes to stop him. He had no idea I already had a plan of my own, and he had absolutely no idea what was about to happen the moment. I walked back into that room. I walked back into that boardroom holding a coffee, just like Richard asked. I set it down gently in front of him. Then I sat down in the chair at the head of the table. Nobody moved. Richard actually laughed, waiting for someone to correct me. Nobody did, because the general counsel, a sharp older woman named Patricia Alvarez, was already sliding a folder across the table toward him, and I watched the color drain from his face as he read the name, printed at the top of the shareholder agreement. Danielle Reyes, he read out loud, confused. Then it clicked. Reyes was my maiden name. Marsh was the name on the investment. Documents his own board had approved 7 months earlier, without ever meeting the investor in person. "You're going to want to hear this part sitting down," I told him. "Which conveniently you already are." I laid it out plainly, the way I'd rehearsed it alone in my apartment 100 times. The consulting contract paid to his brother-in-law for work that didn't exist. The planned layoffs in Cincinnati timed to happen quietly over the holidays. The yacht refurbishment charged to a corporate account the same month he claimed the company couldn't afford employee bonuses. And the Toledo plant. I told them all exactly what that plant meant to families like mine, and exactly what would happen to this company's reputation if the press ever learned. Richard Kessler sold out 90 working-class jobs to fund a boat. The room went silent in a way that felt different from before. Not amused silence, fear. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten anyone. I simply reminded them that as majority shareholder, I had the authority to remove any executive who acted against the financial and ethical interests of this company. Effective that morning, Richard Kessler was no longer CEO of the company, built on the backs of the very people he'd been ready to throw away. I was. Richard didn't leave quietly. He threatened lawsuits, called me ungrateful, said I'd manipulated my way into a company I didn't understand, but the board had seen the documents. The Toledo plant sale was canceled within the week. The Cincinnati layoffs were reversed the same afternoon, and I personally called the department manager to tell her those 90 jobs were safe. She cried on the phone, and honestly so did I. His brother-in-law's contract was terminated immediately, and the money recovered went straight into a retention bonus pool for the employees who'd spent years holding that company together while men like Richard spent their profits on things that meant nothing. 6 months later, Kessler Media Group didn't exist anymore. We renamed it Marsh Industrial Group, headquartered not in some glass tower downtown, but 2 blocks from the Toledo plant, close enough that I could walk the floor and know every name on it. I flew my parents out for the ribbon cutting. My father stood in front of the building his old delivery routes used to pass, running his hand along the brick like he still couldn't quite believe it. My mother didn't say much. She just held my hand the entire time, the same way she used to when I was small and scared of something I couldn't name. I think about that boardroom sometimes, the coffee, the laughter, the assumption that a woman, quietly doing her job, couldn't possibly be the one, holding all the power. People will always underestimate what they can't see coming. I learned that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the tuition you pay for it. I paid mine in full, and I built something that actually means something. If this story hit you the way it hit me writing it down, let me know in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were really talking to? Hit that like button if you believe quiet people can still win the whole room, and subscribe, because next week's story might just be the wildest comeback I've told yet. Thank you for sitting with me till the end.